Dad wrote, "Don't call us. Don't visit. You're cut off." My sister liked the message. I replied, "Perfect. I'll cancel the auto payments first thing tomorrow." By midnight, the chat turned into a storm of missed calls and screaming texts. "My name is Abigail, I'm 29, and this is my story about how my dad sent me a 10-word message that cut me off from the family, how my sister applauded it, and how my quiet reply turned the whole thing into chaos before the night was over." What none of them knew was that I had just come back from lunch with Grandpa, and he was done watching them use me. The message came in at 6:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was folding laundry thinking about nothing important. Then I looked down at my phone. "Don't call us. Don't visit. You're cut off. Dad." I blinked, sat there a second, and then saw my sister Lindsay heart react to it like it was a joke between friends. She followed it up with one word, "Finally." And that told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't just Dad. It was all three of them. My mom, Lindsay, and him. They must have had a full family meeting about this. No one even tried to call before sending it. I could have said a lot. I didn't. I just typed back, "Perfect. I'll cancel the auto payments first thing tomorrow." I swear I could feel the shift from silence to panic through the phone screen. Because here's what they didn't want to admit. I'd been paying for almost everything. Utilities, the internet, groceries, some months. I covered their property taxes last December. I gave Lindsay $300 a month just so she wouldn't call crying about needing it to finish her brand deals. My parents stopped working around the time I was in college. Dad quit his job first, then Mom a few years later. They said they were just tired of the grind and wanted peace. Somehow that peace involved me footing the bills while they lived rent-free in a house they didn't even own. They made me feel like it was my duty. Like I owed it to them. The only person I ever talked to about it was Grandpa. Just the weekend before we'd gone to lunch. I hadn't meant to bring any of it up, but I did. Quietly. Almost like I was ashamed. He listened. Never interrupted. Then he told me to stop. Not slow down. Not reduce. So, thought he was joking. He wasn't. The part one didn't know, until the next day, was that the house my parents lived in, the one I thought had been signed over to them years ago, was still his. He never transferred ownership. Just let them live there. Gave them a chance to be adults when they were still in their 40s. They took it as a permanent vacation. That night, after I replied to Dad's message, my phone blew up. By midnight, I had 14 missed calls and over 30 texts. Mom said I was heartless. Lindsay accused me of financial abuse. Dad texted me at 2 a.m. asking what kind of daughter abandons her family. But by then it was too late. Grandpa had already made up his mind. What happened over the next few days changed everything. Not just for me but for them too. And they had no idea the storm that was coming. The morning after that text storm felt unreal. I barely slept, my phone buzzing half the night with missed calls, messages, and voicemails I didn't even bother listening to. Grandpa had told me to come over first thing in the morning. So I did. His house was quiet, warm, and smelled like coffee. He didn't make small talk. He didn't even ask how I was holding up. He just pushed a thick manila folder across the table and told me to open it. Inside were papers older than me. Property deeds, notarized documents, tax statements. I skimmed the first few pages without really absorbing anything. Then I saw it, the address. The house my parents and sister had been living in for 12 years. My family's forever home. The one they acted like they owned. But it wasn't theirs. It was Grandpa's. It had always been Grandpa's. I looked at him, speechless. He started explaining matter-of-factly. Back in 2013, my parents were supposedly in a rough patch. Dad had quit his job. Mom said she couldn't handle working anymore. Lindsay was still in college. They'd asked to stay at Grandpa's property for a few months. He agreed, thinking they'd recover. Maybe they'd start paying a little rent or pitch in for taxes once they got back on their feet. That was 12 years ago. They'd never paid a cent. They'd never even said thank you. Over time, they started acting like the house was theirs and Grandpa was just an annoying old man they tolerated on holidays. Last Christmas, Mom told him to eat before you come, when he asked if she wanted him to bring food. He didn't tell me any of this before. He'd just been quietly watching. Until last weekend. Until I told him the truth about the bills I'd been covering. Then he pointed to the last page in the folder. A legal notice of occupancy termination. Dated. Signed. Certified. Already prepared. 3 envelopes. One for my parents, one for Lindsay, and one for other adult occupants. Because legally Lindsay counted as a dependent tenant. He said they'd had more than enough time to stand on their own feet. He said it was time they remembered what real life cost. And he said something else that made me go cold. They won't thank you for what you've done for them. They'll hate you for stopping. I asked him if he was sure about all this. He said he'd never been more sure of anything. That this wasn't revenge, it was accountability. He wasn't doing this for me. He was doing it because it was right. That afternoon the letters went out. At first, silence. Then by early evening my phone started blowing up again. Lindsay posted a screenshot of the letter to her Instagram story with a crying emoji and the caption, "We're being thrown out of our own home like garbage, broken heart, broken heart." That's how everyone in the family found out. Not from them directly but from a curated Instagram story. By dinner my phone was ringing nonstop. Aunt Julie called first. Then Uncle Tom. Then my cousin Megan. All of them asking what was happening. All of them confused. Some of them angry. I told them the truth. I told them my parents hadn't paid for a roof over their heads in over a decade. I told them I'd been covering the utilities and groceries for years. I told them Grandpa never signed over the house and that he'd finally had enough. At first there was silence. Then the responses started. Julie said she'd always wondered how they were affording to live like that. Megan admitted she thought my parents were just good with money. Tom said he wasn't surprised at all. But Lindsay didn't stop. That night she left me a voicemail sobbing, accusing me of destroying her life. My mom texted me paragraphs about how I was a traitor. My dad sent me just 3 words. "You did this." But I hadn't done anything. Not really. I had just stopped paying. The next day things went from private to public. My mother decided to escalate in a way none of us expected, and it dragged the entire extended family straight into the fight. And that was the moment everything stopped being just a family drama and turned into a spectacle. I woke up the next morning to a text from my cousin Megan that just said, "Have you seen Facebook?" Well, I hadn't. I hadn't checked it in days. I logged in and the first thing I saw was a public post from my mom. "After decades of sacrifice, we've been betrayed by someone we loved. We're being forced out of our home. Yes, our home, by manipulation, lies, and greed. Please respect our privacy while we figure out how to survive this." Below the post was a photo of the house taken in soft morning light, as if they were being torn from a cozy, sacred family shrine. Comments were pouring in. Neighbors, distant relatives, old church friends. Words like disgusting, heartbreaking, how could anyone do this to their own family? My name wasn't in the post. But it didn't have to be. Lindsay had already made sure everyone knew who the villain was. She posted a screenshot of a Venmo request I'd sent her months ago. $200 for utilities. She wrote under it, "This is what family looks like when they only care about money. #unbelievable #hurt. Then came the DMs, strangers. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. People accusing me of kicking my parents out onto the street. Of destroying the family. One woman, I think she used to babysit me, called me a parasite. I didn't respond to any of it. But Grandpa did. The next morning he sent an email to the entire family. I didn't know he even used email like that. But he did. And he used it well. The email was titled, "Facts regarding the residence at 2485 Cedar Hollow." He laid it out like a court document. No emotion. No name calling. Just bullet points. "The property is legally and solely owned by me, William Pierce. I permitted my son and his family to live there rent-free since 2013. They have not paid utilities, taxes, or maintenance for over 10 years. My granddaughter Abigail has been covering these costs out of her own pocket for at least the last 4 years, without reimbursement or acknowledgement. No legal or verbal agreement has ever been made transferring ownership of the home. I have issued a legal 60-day notice for them to vacate. This decision was mine and mine alone." He ended the email with one sentence. "Being family does not exempt anyone from responsibility." That shut some people up. But not my mom. The next week she went to the local church, the same one she hadn't attended in 3 years, and stood up during the prayer request portion of the service to ask for spiritual support, because her children had turned against her, and she was about to be homeless. A woman from the church, Mrs. Ellen, who taught my Sunday school when I was 8, called Grandpa the next day and asked what was going on. He told her. She apologized. To him. That's when something completely unexpected happened. 2 days later, someone slipped a handwritten letter into my apartment mailbox. It wasn't signed. Inside was a copy of a printed Facebook post that Lindsay had made, and quickly deleted, complaining about how she wasn't about to get a job just because some old man wants to play judge. Below it, the note just said, "You should keep this. People are watching." I don't know who sent it. But it meant one thing. Not everyone was buying their story. And then, out of nowhere, I got a message request from someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. Someone who, somehow, was about to become part of all this in a way I never saw coming. That message changed the entire direction of this fight. And it gave Grandpa an idea he probably shouldn't have had, but I'm glad he did. The message came from Adam Reese. We sat next to each other in sophomore year biology, barely spoke back then. He moved to Texas after graduation. I hadn't seen his name in almost 12 years. His message said, "Hey, this is random, but I think I stayed in your parents' house through Airbnb back in March. Recognized the kitchen from your sister's stories. Didn't realize it was your family until now. Airbnb." I read the message 3 times before it made sense. Apparently, my parents had been secretly renting out the basement and part of the upstairs on and off for months. Adam stayed there during a work trip and said it looked like a normal short-term rental. Private entrance, keypad lock, little welcome sign that said, Cedar Hollow Retreat. Lindsay was listed as the host under a fake name. She even left him a guest book to sign. I asked him if he still had proof. He did. He sent me screenshots of the listing, the message history, and his receipt. All of it linked directly back to Lindsay's email. The photos in the listing showed rooms in the house that Grandpa still owned. Rooms he had never given permission to rent. Rooms I had assumed were just being used for storage or guest. When I told Grandpa, he didn't even blink. He said, "Go get the guest book." We didn't know if it still existed, but if Lindsay had left a paper trail of cash income while living rent-free, it would change everything, legally. Because not only was she living in a house she didn't own, she was profiting off it. And that made things complicated for her. I texted Lindsay, said I was coming by to pick up some of my old stuff. She replied with just one word. "Fine." I didn't even want anything from the house. I just wanted to get inside. The front door was open when I arrived. She wasn't home. Mom was in the kitchen, her back turned, pretending to be busy. She didn't speak. I didn't either. I walked downstairs to the basement and it felt like walking into someone else's house entirely. There were hotel-style welcome signs, a wall-mounted brochure holder, a digital thermostat, a locked cabinet labeled, "Supplies, do not touch." I opened drawers. Searched under furniture. Nothing. Then I found a box behind the washing machine. Inside, sheets, extra Wi-Fi passwords, blank feedback forms, and the guest book. It was full. Pages and pages of dates, names, little reviews. Thanks for the peaceful stay. Loved the location. Very cozy. Some were in neat cursive. Some in crayon. A few had actual dates that lined up perfectly with Adam's screenshots. I took photos of every single page. By the time I walked back upstairs, Mom was standing at the front door like she knew what I had found. I didn't say a word. Just walked past her and out the door. That night, Grandpa and I sat down and went through everything. He was quiet for a while, then said, "They want to make this public? Fine. Let's give them something real to talk about." He called his lawyer the next morning. The eviction process was already underway, but this was different. This could move things faster. Because now it wasn't just about unpaid rent. It was about profit made off someone else's property. Without permission. Proof. We didn't expect what happened next. I thought they'd panic. Maybe apologize. Maybe beg. Instead, they doubled down, and what they did next made everything 10 times worse. They went to Grandpa's old friends. The ones from his retirement group. From his veteran circles. From his church. And they started telling people he was losing his mind. That I had manipulated him. That this was elder abuse. But Grandpa? He was one step ahead. And what he revealed publicly at that point made every last one of them wish they'd kept their mouths shut. Grandpa didn't say anything publicly right away. He waited even after hearing they were whispering through his old circles, calling him confused, unstable, accusing me of turning him against them. Lindsay had even told someone at church that I'd forged his signature on the eviction letters. It got back to him by the end of the week. I was furious, but Grandpa was calm. Too calm. He told me to be patient. Then, a few days later, he invited a few of his oldest friends over for coffee. 4 of them. People he'd known for decades. They showed up one by one. Sat in his living room. All of them had heard some version of the story through gossip, but none of them knew what was actually happening. He sat them down and handed each of them a printed packet. Inside, copies of the house deed showing he was still the legal owner. The guest book photos. Screenshots of the Airbnb listing. A list of expenses I'd covered with bank statements to match. And, at the very end, a notarized letter from his doctor dated last month, stating that he was of sound mind and fully capable of managing his own legal and financial affairs. He told them very plainly that he'd made a mistake giving his son and daughter-in-law over a decade of free housing, and he wasn't going to spend his final years cleaning up after people who didn't think they owed him so much as a thank you. They were quiet when they left. But within a day the rumors stopped. Dead. Just like that. It was like someone hit a mute button on the whole family drama. By the end of that week, Grandpa's lawyer filed to have the 60-day notice legally enforced and shortened due to unauthorized subleasing and income abuse. The court sided with him. Gave them 14 days. 2 weeks. I don't know what I expected when they found out. Screaming. Maybe a showdown at Grandpa's door? But what I got was silence. Complete silence. No more calls. No texts. Lindsay deleted her stories. Mom shut down her Facebook. Dad didn't say a word. I drove past the house a few days later and saw the garage open. Cardboard boxes everywhere. Cheap tape. Old blankets draped over furniture. They were packing. It was actually happening. On the final day I didn't go over there. Grandpa didn't either. We didn't need to. A neighbor texted him that they left early in the morning, faces tight, barely speaking to each other. The car was loaded in silence. No one waved. No one said goodbye. They left the house key on the porch, tucked under a cracked flower pot. Later that afternoon, Grandpa asked if I wanted to move in. Just like that. Told me the house was mine if I wanted it. I looked around his kitchen, the folder still sitting on the table. I told him no. I liked my apartment. I liked paying for my own life. I didn't want that house. Not even with new paint and different memories. He nodded. Said that made him proud. And then he told me something I'll never forget. Now they get to live like normal people. Go to work. Pay rent. Try. It wasn't mean. It wasn't bitter. It was just true. That house stayed quiet for a while. But the story didn't end there. Because what came next was the real show. The part where the rest of the family finally figured out what actually happened. And what they did when they found out. It was the final nail in the coffin for my parents' pity parade. The first update. It took almost 3 weeks before the rest of the family caught up to what really happened. The smear campaign didn't last. The whispers dried up. And eventually curiosity took over. People wanted to know why my parents suddenly moved out of the house they'd lived in for over a decade. And why Lindsay, the self-proclaimed digital entrepreneur, was posting Instagram stories from different living rooms every few days. They weren't talking anymore. No updates. No drama. Just quiet. And that silence started making people ask questions. Then came the barbecue. Aunt Julie hosted it, her annual fall get-together. The kind of event where all the folding chairs came out and the paper plates got soggy from baked beans. Grandpa was invited but passed. He said the only thing he wanted to grill that day was a steak at home. I decided to go. The moment I walked into that backyard, I knew most of them had heard something. A few people looked at me like I was a ghost. Others just avoided eye contact altogether. Cousin Jacob was the first to say anything real. He leaned in and asked quietly, "So, I guess they're really out, huh?" I nodded. He shook his head like he didn't quite believe it. Then he told me something I hadn't heard yet. Lindsay had apparently tried to list someone else's apartment on Facebook Marketplace. Photos stolen from a real listing in a completely different state. She claimed it was her own and asked for deposits up front. Someone recognized the photos, flagged the post, and it got taken down. Now she was crashing at a friend's place, floating between projects, whatever that meant. As for my parents, they were living in a small duplex on the edge of town. 1 bedroom. No porch. They were both working part-time. Dad at an auto parts store. Mom doing customer service calls from home. No more mornings sipping coffee on Grandpa's deck. No more watching TV all day. Just bills and rent and life. Julie pulled me aside near the end of the barbecue. She was blunt. Said at first she didn't know what to believe, but once Grandpa's email came out and people started putting together how long it had all gone on, the picture changed. She said the family felt lied to. Manipulated. Said my mom had been calling people to clarify the situation and it only made it worse. Because nothing spreads faster than desperation disguised as damage control. The most surreal moment came 2 days later. Grandpa and I were sitting on his back porch. He'd started planting again, filling the raised beds with fall vegetables. Where old rusted patio furniture and junk used to sit, there was now space. Clean, open space. He asked if I wanted to keep the house now that it was empty. I told him again, no. That house was never mine. Not in the way it counted. It was a place full of memories that didn't belong to me. And I liked my life now. Quiet, balanced mine. He nodded. No argument. Then he said something I still think about. Sometimes it's not the people who leave that bring peace. It's the ones you finally let go of. Now here's how things stand. My parents pay rent on time. Because now they have to. Lindsay stopped trying to live online and is starting to realize life costs money. The content dried up. So did the sympathy. A few relatives tried to play neutral for a while, but even they came around after seeing how long I had been covering everything alone. Me. I go to work, pay my bills, cook dinner in a kitchen that doesn't come with guilt. No more texts asking for just a little help. No more late night calls because the Wi-Fi was down and they didn't know who else to ask. No more secrets. The storm passed. And when it did, the truth stood tall while the noise collapsed around it. Funny how that works. The final update. Thought it was over. I really did. 3 weeks of silence turned into 4. Then a month. No calls, no texts, no new Instagram stories. For a while, I let myself believe they were finally living their lives. Quietly, bitterly, but independently. I wasn't expecting a thank you. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I just wanted the peace to last. And then last Thursday, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not from my mom. Not from Lindsay. From my dad. 4 full pages of what I can only describe as the most calculated manipulation I've ever read. He said they were settling into their new life, but were emotionally devastated by how I'd turned the family against them. He said Lindsay was suffering, and that they were worried she'd fall into a dark place if something didn't change soon. He didn't ask me to move them back in. He didn't even ask for money directly. He asked if I would consider signing my name onto a loan application they were submitting to get back on their feet. Not a joke. Not a scam email. A real, physical document was enclosed, half filled with my information already written in pencil. I sat there for 10 minutes just staring at it. They were trying to use my credit now. That was the twist I didn't see coming. After everything, after being evicted from a home they never paid for, after the public drama, after being exposed in front of the entire family, they still thought they had access to my life. I didn't even respond. I packed up the envelope, the half-completed form, and dropped it off at Grandpa's. He didn't say a word when I handed it over. Just opened the envelope, looked at the form, and nodded once like he'd been waiting for this final move. The next day I checked my credit report just to be safe. No surprises yet, but I locked it down with every freeze and fraud alert I could activate. And then Grandpa made one more call, to his lawyer. He said he wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened to him I would be protected. That his estate wouldn't go to the people who had treated him and me like we owed them the world. That everything, the house, the land, his savings, would be documented properly. I never asked him to do that. I never even thought about it. But I didn't argue. Because at this point I knew better. This wasn't just about being selfish. This was about them believing they were entitled to whatever wasn't nailed down. Even after they'd been cut off. No. The house is staying empty for now. Grandpa likes it quiet. Lindsay is back to trying to sell coaching packages through her Instagram, but people stopped buying when she posted one too many manifestation videos from a friend's guest room. My parents are still in the duplex. Dad took on another job. Mom's barely online anymore. But they know the door's closed. For good. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Some people don't break your boundaries. They pretend they were never there to begin with. You don't owe them another explanation. You don't owe them a reaction. You owe yourself the space to move on. And that's exactly what I'm doing.